Alrighty. So hi everyone. I'm Tracy West. I work as an assistive tech instructional facilitator down in Tacoma for the Tacoma Public Schools. And this is a presentation for the Special Education Technology Center on Learning First, Technology Second, which is a book that I was fortunate enough to read last year. And then this year, it was actually even passed out during our kickoff for the entire school. So it's a very popular book. All right. Housekeeping, just mute your microphone unless you're the one who's talking. I am going to leave it unmuted for everyone. And make sure you ask a lot of questions. This is your webinar, and you certainly don't want to listen to me talk the whole time. And it will also be very short if I'm the only one who's talking. So please become involved. And you can either use the chat window or you can unmute your microphone to speak. Okay. So this webinar description is, this book was written by Liz Kolb, and she describes in her book that Learning First, Technology Second is called what she calls the Triple E framework, which is a research-based framework of how do you integrate technology into quality lesson design so that students are using the technology for solid engagement, enhancement, and extension of their learning, as opposed to just using the technology as a time filler. And in this webinar, we're going to discuss the foundations of this Triple E framework and how it applies to our work in assistive technology. Your learning objectives, you'll understand the three components of that Triple E framework that I just mentioned and how they work together to support technology integration. We'll identify quality technology integration activities and techniques to support educational lesson planning, and then we'll also design a quality lesson with integrated technology to use in the class tomorrow as we go through. So the Triple E framework, which is the main premise of this entire book, is to keep the instruction on the learning goals and not on the technology. So frequently in my role, we have people who ask for technology, and if I go in to use it with them, they say, oh, I don't have the right apps to do what we need to do because I don't have those math apps, I don't have the writing apps, the reading apps, I don't have the fun apps to keep the kids engaged. So it's really saying that the technology is not the important part, it's the learning that's important. The framework offers enhancement of technology integrated lesson planning, and I will show you the website, and there's quite a bit of information on the website. It supports the evaluation of effectiveness of apps. There's a check sheet that you can go through, and there's even, this is fairly new, but there's even a way to have others critique your lesson and see if it's something that really fulfills the mission of the Triple E framework. It is based on research of a successful and unsuccessful technology integration over the past 2 decades. So what she did was she looked at how many technology integration initiatives that had happened, and which ones were successful, which ones weren't successful, and how were we going to put them all together. And I liked this quote: since the early 1990s, research has found that educational technology with a drill and practice approach often has no effect on learning or cognition. Yet most technology tools created for education are still drill and practice and in the lower order of Bloom's taxonomy. So again, we're kind of really thinking about some of those math apps, some of the flashcard apps that might be useful, that have a purpose but aren't working toward that Triple E framework. So I'm going to switch screens here real fast so you can see what the Triple E framework looks like. Do you all see my screen?
Yes.
Thank you. All right, so this is tripleeframework.com. And on here, it really goes into more about the information that right at the moment there is the book that she wrote, and it's published on ISTE as well. And then we can go into the about, and you can get some information about why we use the Triple E framework, how it's different, what is it, and then the instructional strategies that can go with it. And she has examples. She's really filled this out since last year when I started teaching about this. Scrolling back up, and I'm afraid I don't want to make anybody feel a little like sick because I move it around too much. After that information, she then goes into more about engagement, enhancement, and extension, which we'll talk about again. She has a rubric, so you can design a lesson, you can evaluate a lesson, and you can see if the app that you're looking for is really, truly works for the Triple E. And then she has case studies. And on this case studies, you can also do some analysis. And there's a whole bunch more on her blog, instructional strategies, templates, professional development. This Triple E PLN is in a beta phase. This is very interesting actually when I clicked on here because you can log in and then you can evaluate your lesson, and then you can get other people to evaluate your lesson also. Okay, so we're going to kind of, I didn't log into this, so I may be able to remember my username and password. We'll see. All right. All right, I'm going to kick back over here. So those three components again are engagement, enhancement, and extension. The engagement is how much time on task. Are they actively focusing on the learning goals? Are they participating socially? If anybody has taken an iPad class with some of the ATIA or the CTD group, they've had some iPad classes about the social skills that kids learn and how you have to be co-engaged, not just isolated engagement, to bring out all the social learning that goes along with it. The enhancement is that the text tools should add value or scaffolds to the learning goals that couldn't be achieved otherwise. So sometimes when somebody says, well, all you have on here is Microsoft Word because we're a Microsoft district, I say, how can that Microsoft Word, what kind of lesson can you do that's going to enhance that the student can then write about? This is their tool to write with. It's not their tool to memorize with. And then the extension part is how does that create a bridge between classroom and everyday life? So I think what we'll do is we'll go through each one of these, and then I'll open it up, and I want you guys to also talk about what you think with engagement and what does that mean in your practice, or how can you help other educators know more about engagement and all of these components. So this graphic came directly from the website, so you can always use it as well. Does the technology tool aid students in developing a more sophisticated understanding of the content? Are they getting more time on task? Are they being active social people? And what does that technology really mean? So technology includes paper and pencil. And we need to remember that technology is not just about something that's computerized. Technology could be a sensory tool that's helping that student be able to be more time on task. Okay, that the students are actively cognitively engaged, so thinking, reflecting, having effortful mindful activity, and not just a physical engagement of swiping and tapping. So in some of my lower classrooms, primary classrooms, DD classrooms, autism classrooms, the kids are just starting to learn how to swipe and tap. So that's a good physical activity, but how are they learning that swiping and tapping actually engages their mind? What does that do? Again, I harp a lot on the social interactivity of the technology. So how are they using it in a co-use manner? Are they engaging with the technology? So if they're a preschooler sitting down with a piece of technology, who's their co-person? Is it a teacher who's sitting with them? Is it another student and they're learning how to take turns? That could be very good. Adding that human element of co-use is very important. And so it causes the behavior of the students to shift to being more active and social learners. What do you all think about engagement? What makes you think of how you might be able to explain this to people? Where do you see it working in your classrooms and with your students of all ages? Okay, so we will move on to the next one. And if you have any thoughts about engagement, then you can chime in. So some of the things that I do think about engagement really come a lot. Most of the time we're using our devices for students with autism and preschool rooms. But we could also say maybe it's in a learning resource center and the kids are taking turns in writing about something. Or they're using an app that shares their writing, like a Google Doc or a Word Online document, where they're starting to share. I heard from anybody who knows Kevin Honeycutt. If you join up with Kevin Honeycutt, he presented for us this year at our kickoff celebration, and he's an amazing speaker. He's just so interesting. And his mind is a whirlwind, comes from his own background is very poor, moved around a lot, got out of that system, and he's an educator who uses assistive technology as a learning tool for everyone. Very interesting guy. So look him up. Kevin Honeycutt is his name. And he talks about engagement with some of our nonverbal kids or physically disabled kids by getting them involved in music. And that maybe they're just blowing on an iPad or a phone and the app makes the music for them, like a flute kind of music. That would be a co-engagement kind of activity because someone has to hold it for them, or they're making music in a group setting. So he is very fascinating to watch and listen to. So in Liz Kolb's information on her website, she does have these questions that would be, you would answer these questions and you would mark yourself a 0, 1, or a 2. If you get more 2s and your score is higher, then you have what she calls a green lesson. That's a more fulfilled lesson, really works on the Triple E framework. If you have more 0s and 1s in all of these categories, you would need some enhancement in your lesson to bring it forward for more Triple E. So the questions that she asks for engagement are these 3. Does the technology allow students to focus on the task of the assignment or activity with less distraction? Does the technology motivate students to start the learning process? And does the technology cause a shift in the behavior of the students, where they move from a passive to an active social learner? So you would answer those 3 questions, get your score, and then you'd move on to the next criterion too. She looks at these different instructional strategies for engagement, like guided practice, modeling your thinking, doing a software tour, maybe the students reflectively monitor. So one of the things that Kevin Honeycutt talked about was he's a big history buff, and he will have all of his kids on whatever device they happen to have. It could be their home device, it could be a school device, it could be a shared device, whatever they happen to have. Sometimes it could be a pencil and paper if that was the strategy that child needed. And he will just start hammering them with some questions. Like, what was the one he pulled out was something about a submarine that he was talking about. And he just started hammering the kids with these questions. And he'd say, okay, you go look up that information. And that student would go out on the internet, look up that information, and then they would put it up onto a Google Doc or whatever format you're using for your writing tool, combined writing tool, would put it up on the Google Doc, and then they would answer the question. So while Johnny's working on that question, then he's asking another question, and somebody says, oh, I'll look that one up, and they'll start working on that one. And then the next kid says, oh, that brings up this question. So they work through this whole problem using this strategy of using the technology to go get some information, and then using the technology to put it up on the board. So if I was working in a what we call a developmental classroom where we have some kids on iPads, I would put 2 or 3 kids and say, I'd like you guys to research this question with your para, if there's one available, or with their peer from another classroom if we were doing this as a group. You guys get to research this question and then put your answer up on the board on this website that you're on, or this app that you're on. Anybody have any other examples of engagement strategies that they have used in the past?
The conference has been unmuted.
Okay. So that was part of that purposeful partnering that I was kind of talking about. And creating a mentor text, that was also part of that. So then we move on to enhancement. This is where we're talking about the scaffolding. So it could be a web out there that the kids are using to scaffold that a paper and pencil can't necessarily work. It might be their accommodation of having access to a computer so that they can type. It might be their accommodation of having speech recognition support, or their text-to-speech support. However, we're going to enhance it and scaffold it so that those students who might not be able to do it traditionally might be able to do this differently. So this is going beyond the drill and practice method to include exploration, creation, and problem solving. That problem solving is really important as well, getting the kids to start problem solving. How are you even going to navigate through the technology? I have adults, unfortunately, that still don't know how to navigate through the technology and problem solve when that button isn't right where I want it to be. Where is it? The good example is when you're using some Microsoft tool and you've gone from Windows 7 to Windows 10 or 2013 to 2016, and they've just moved things around just enough to make it confusing again. So you're also wanting to promote self-reflection, self-assessment, and self-explanation. And how are we adding value? So the value-added enhancement of learning through technology when the tool is somehow aiding, assisting, and scaffolding. Again, that would be that student who every time that he has to do something with a pencil, he gets 2 sentences down, but when given some speech recognition, he can get through so much more. Okay? And this is where level of learning becomes personalized and more relatable to the user. So I do have a couple of students who are not on special education, but when they're using their speech recognition, they're so much faster, and they're more engaged, and this enhances their ability to engage with the lesson. Okay. So the question she asks, does the technology tool aid students in developing and demonstrating a more sophisticated understanding of the content? So is it creating opportunities for creation, production over consumption? Sorry, challenging word for me. Does the technology create scaffolds to make it easier to understand the concepts or ideas? And does the technology create paths for students to demonstrate their understanding of the learning goals in a way that they couldn't do with the traditional tools? So even thinking about us and how we use technology, when I'm sitting in a meeting anymore or observing a student or observing a teacher, a whole lot of what I'm using is the scripting, so I can script better when I'm keyboarding. Much, much faster for me than it is handwriting. But sometimes I need to handwrite, so I grab my pen and I can write on the screen. Sometimes I need to take a picture so that I can remember what it was that I saw. And when I'm writing a report or coming back to that teacher and saying, here's what I saw, I can take a little video. I can use my calendar. Heck, I use my calendar all the time. In fact, I wouldn't be able to exist without my calendar because that has all the reminders of don't forget to connect with this person, don't forget to do this. So to me, those are all learning goals as well. I want to be able to do my job better, so I start using my technology more purposefully. In the classroom, these might be instructional strategies that you can do. We did look up switcheroo one time, and I was going to do it before this class. And what switcheroo was, I don't remember exactly what it was, but there is actually a strategy called switcheroo if you ever want to go out and look at it. This would be where you're differentiating for a student. You are maybe doing more visual representations of your learning. So it could be that that student is creating a video and putting it up. Anybody who took Dan Hurley's class last year through SETC, he put up a green screen, and the kids got to demonstrate what they knew. So the activity was learning about London, throwing up a bunch of things about London up onto a piece of paper up on the screen that was shared with everyone, and then creating a green screen video of London, like going across the London Bridge, and that you can go across the London Bridge in a wheelchair, and you can go across the London Bridge this way, and this is how tall it is, all of those things. So they created a nice visual representation of their learning. Anybody have any reflections on enhancement that they want to share? Alrighty. So the final one is this extension and making that bridge between what we've learned in the classroom to what we've learned, what we can apply to real world situations and everyday skills. So again, if we were talking about maybe that London example would be, now let's plan a trip. What would a trip look like if we were going to London? One, we need to know what the time zone difference is. So you could pull up your iPad clock up on the screen and show what the time zone difference was between Tacoma, Washington, and London. And then you can have a discussion. Oh, does that mean it's tomorrow night? Is that tonight? I think it's 9 hours ahead of us. My in-laws happen to be over in that neck of the woods right now. So you could have a discussion about that. You could say, I wonder what is the most popular food in London? And the kids could look up fish and chips and learn that chips in London really means French fries instead of here. And then you could even go out further and say, what if I wanted to order French fries in France? And I'm not even going to butcher that one because I do not know French, but then they could go ahead and start learning all the different words of French fries in different languages. So that's building those, bringing those things into real world potential situations. It might also be building those soft skills for future references and future experiences of when we're walking across the London Bridge, we have to have the stamina to walk that far. That we have to walk on this side of the road. That we have to watch out for the cars, and I totally don't know this, but are the cars coming the opposite direction? Or how are we going to watch out, look both ways before we cross? Any of those kind of things that we're trying to build in some soft skills, like you need to wait. It's your turn to wait. So we've co-engaged, but we're working with a group of 2 to start with, and then we're working with a group of 3, and they're having to learn how to sit and wait their turn. And then bringing meaningful learning that moves their knowledge from pre-existing to new knowledge that then they could go home and share with their families. Hey, we learned that in London they call them chips. I want to go to my favorite burger store, which currently is Habit Burger, and I want to get some chips. And then the kid goes to Habit Burger and they say, some chips, please. I would like a hamburger and chips. Alrighty. So then we have some extension questions. Does the technology create opportunities for students to learn outside of their typical school day? Does it create a bridge between school learning and everyday life experiences? And does the technology allow students to build their skills so that they can use those skills in everyday life? For my students at the level I'm kind of talking about, sometimes we're just talking about how are they going to communicate with their families. And then some of these extension instructional strategies, like the green screen, they would be role playing. You could do pen pals, where I'm going to connect with someone across the country and use my technology to write to them. Applying it to real world issues, what's going on in the real world right now in politics or in environmental studies or anything else. Partnering with real world organizations, one of the things that we like to use our extension strategies for would be to Skype with, let's say, a park ranger. We've just learned about all the animals that are in Washington, which is actually a lesson that they have to learn for their state standards, is can they explain and look at the animals that are in the area, I guess. This was a lesson we did last year in a classroom. And then the kids went out and connected with the park ranger up at Mount Rainier, and they got to have a real conversation with him. Well, that was using technology appropriately. And we created an authentic discourse with others. We're also using the tools that are prominent in everyday life. So I really focus on giving kids access to the technology that they use at home. I am a big proponent of bring your own device and using it the way that everybody does. I personally use my phone all day long. In fact, I'm having battery issues right now because I lose my battery, and I'm going to need to get a new one. But I use it all the time because I don't want to carry around my laptop with me, and it's there when I finish a meeting with somebody. I use my technology to draft out a report or draft out a reply in an email, send it to myself, and then I go through and edit it on my larger technology and then make sure it's set and ready to send out. So I can do that much faster now. Anybody have any thoughts on extension or any of these other ideas? And don't forget, you can also put something in the chat window if you'd prefer. Alrighty. So that kind of concludes what we've been talking about. I do want to show you a few other items that you might want to add to your toolbox here. This is the link for the EEE framework. Here's the link to ISTE, which is the International Society for Technology and Education. And here's the link for the Center on Technology and Disability, CTD. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and pop on over here. We've seen this one. I want to show you another book that I really liked. This Bring Your Own Learning, Transforming Instruction with Any Device is an excellent book to read. If you are an ISTE member, you get a reduction in the price. You might be able to find this out on Amazon as well. But this book kind of goes through your mobile learning initiative and integrating with your web developers, integrating with your web ideas, and what kind of goals are you trying to achieve. So I found it a very quick and interesting read. Also, it talks a little bit about digital citizenship and some resources for digital literacy, citizenship, which is another big part. If you were looking at getting the Learning First, Technology Second book, also from ISTE or from her website, she goes through several scenarios, mostly general ed classrooms, so not as special ed focused, but lots of scenarios where she kind of goes through and says, here's the lesson, here's how we evaluated this lesson, and here's how we could make it better. Okay. And then the other book, anybody who knows Chris Bouguet knows that he's just he's an amazingly dynamic speaker. If you ever get a chance to hear him speak down at ATIA, sometimes at Closing the Gap, he has a blog called AT Tipscast where he goes through. He's just very dynamic. But he wrote this book this year called The New Assistive Tech, Making Learning Awesome for All. I read this summer, and he has an exceptional idea of what it is like, what it might be like to use more universal design strategy in general ed, and bringing, now that technology is so prevalent, when I started assistive technology, it was, trying so hard just to get somebody to give us a laptop. And now all the kids come to school with their technology. He really talks about how might you change lessons and make them universally designed initially. So I loved this book. His other book was excellent as well. And then I also wanted to show you, for those of you who don't know, the CTD. CTD. So this Center on Technology and Disability, if you register on this, you can, they have webinars, often fantastic webinars on this site, and some classes that you can take. Popular AT topics, accessibility, early STEM, literacy, transition, which is huge. And this is a free, generally free site for everybody to go to, do webinars and e-learning. So I really recommend that you consider looking at this one. They have some recorded webinars as well. And, they're just very similar to what we do here. And then their e-learning, you can take some courses from them as well. All right. Well, you guys, we actually got done a little bit early. So I just want to make sure that that's me. You guys don't need to see my mug. If there's any questions y'all have or any other discussion you want to have, phone lines are open. And I'm going to go ahead and click on stop.